Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever your time zone is. Hello, everyone. Welcome to International Legal League second webinar. My name is Shivani, and I'm the founder of International Legal League. I have my beautiful team here and my co-host Vasuki, who will be hosting this webinar. And we have our speaker for the day, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let me just introduce myself. So I'm the country ambassador for France at the International Legal League. I've graduated in law and I've done my LPC as well. So Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Lauren. I've just graduated from the University of Manchester studying chemistry, and I'm making the transition to law. I'm actually starting my GDL on Monday, so very, very soon making that transition. And yeah, I did a vacation scheme with Pinsent Masons this summer and hope to pursue a career in commercial law.
All right, okay, great. So the first section of this webinar will be about your career in law and application tips. So the first question for you is, why did you choose a career in law coming from a non-law background?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. I feel like, obviously I get asked that quite a lot coming from such a different kind of discipline like chemistry. I think, coming from a non-law background, you have many different skill sets, I think. And I think as well, for me, I've just always had that interest in business. I did, business modules throughout my degree as well. So at Manchester, I had the option to do management or enterprise or innovation, things like that, that kind of added an extra kind of string to my bow, I guess. So I've always been really interested in business side of things. And whenever lawyers talk about, why they decided to do law, I often find they say that, it's such a dynamic profession, you're constantly learning. And that's something that was always really attractive to me. Because chemistry is very analytical, you're constantly problem solving and thinking of new ways of doing things, and I felt that law was a really good career path for me, just because it combined the business side of things and also the analytical and problem solving skills that I would have from the degree discipline that I've done. But yeah, I think I've always had that kind of business interest. My dad's in business, so I've always had grown up around it, I guess. So yeah, definitely that's my reason.
Okay, great. So what challenges did you face as a non-law graduate during the VAC scheme? And did you ever feel you were at an advantage or a disadvantage?
I think being non-law is a bit of both. I feel like you have an advantage in that you automatically kind of stand out because you do something that's a bit different. For example, I've not really met anybody that that's done chemistry going into law. So I'm kind of where is everyone? Yeah. So yeah, I think you're an advantage in that you stand out pretty easily just by the degree discipline that you've done. But then I think in a way, I mean, it's not really a disadvantage, but I think because you're not immersed in that world, I didn't really know what networking was or things like that. So I kind of had to just learn on my feet and just kind of think about all these different things all at once. It was kind of crazy the time last year when I was first thinking of applying and going through all of this and going to events like this and networking and speaking to people. It was all very alien to me coming from chemistry, because in chemistry we, as you can imagine, we don't really do networking or things like that. So it was very different for me to kind of get into that mindset and kind of expand my network and just speak to people. I think that's probably the biggest advice that I would give to non-law people, is to just ask people for help and get as much information as you can. Just be like a sponge and just soak it all up, because I knew absolutely nothing about any of this time last year, and it's crazy now for me to be on the other side, being invited to speak. It's a real honor to just get to help people, I guess, now, which is pretty crazy, but yeah.
Okay, great. How did you research law firms and differentiate from its competitors? And what was your successful strategy for the Pinsent Mason application scheme?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that researching the firm is the most important part of the application process. I feel like people just kind of brush past it, because a lot of people I know, they just kind of they go for loads of different applications. They apply to 20 or something applications, and I think it's so important to just hone in on those few that you really want to work at. That's what I always say to people, is if you you have to envision yourself working at the place. There's no point applying somewhere that you don't really want to work. So I always was ask myself that. And I think as well, the firm website is always a really good place to start. I use chambers as well, you know, to get extra information. But I think the firm website, it gives you like a sense of like the language that they use, you know, for example, like core values and things like that, to like slip into your application, just like subtly put in those words and little details, I think is like really important. But you know, for me, I think it's really important as well to just make sure that you differentiate each application from each other. So like I would never like copy and paste, you know, something, you know, into different applications. You know, I've heard so many horror stories from, you know, various people where they said they've known people that have like copied and pasted stuff with like the wrong name of the firm, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's just such a like nightmare thing, isn't it? But you know, I would always say like write it from scratch and just really try and like be yourself, and don't try and think what you think they want to see. I always try and just write it as yourself and do that kind of thing. And then, you know, maybe ask like a friend or someone to read over it just to check that like you've not got any errors and things like that. But yeah, I think in terms of researching the firm, you also have to like, I've even made like, you know, like a table before where I put like compared like the USPs of each firm, so you can easily see like the difference between them. Because I think sometimes when you're first, especially for non-law people that don't really know anything about firms and things like that, it can be like super overwhelming. But I think, you know, getting all the information down on a table, like writing down the USPs, what's their like total revenue, like what are their key clients, things like that, so you can easily like compare them like next to each other, and you can actually see the difference between them. Because sometimes it can be quite overwhelming when you just look at websites, they all kind of look the same from if you first just look at them. But it really, you need to like really take the deep dive and like go and look at all areas of the business and like look where you can add your value.
Okay, that's great. Great answer. All right, so the next session would be about related to vacation scheme, and specifically about Pinsent Mason. So how did you find the application process for the vacation scheme, and do you have any tips for each stage of the application process?
Yeah, I think the application is probably the hardest bit, I would say. You know, it's really difficult to convey like what you want to convey in like a certain amount of words, especially when there's a word limit. But I found with the Pinsent's application, you know, it was quite lengthy. Like, you know, you could really like express your opinions and whatnot in the questions, which was really great. And I think, you know, you just have to just always align what you've done with your like core with their core values. So like Pinsent Masons, for example, they have like an ABC like core values. They have like approachable, bold and connected. So, you know, I would make like a little mind map of like the skills that I've done or like work experience I've done, and try and fit it to that, and see like how the stuff that I've done fits in with what they're kind of like going for as a business and their like strategy. I think you have to look at where the business is going as well, and I think that's going to be important now because of, you know, COVID and everything. You have to look at the kind of business strategy and what the actual business is doing, because at the end of the day, like a lawyer is a business advisor and a law firm is a business, so it's really important to actually think about it like that, and kind of take the necessary steps to include that in your application too. And, you know, think about potential, you know, new markets that they might want to branch out into. And also I think something that is really like fundamental, it sounds really stupid, but I think the most important thing is like thinking about where you can add your value. So like think about what your unique selling points are, like what are your core values, like what can you do to like sell yourself to the firm, I guess. So like you need to think about what your also what you want out of a training contract. So that's always really important. You know, if you're looking at if you're the kind of person that would prefer more independence, or like, you know, want to like have more responsibility from the get-go, then a US firm might be for you. You know, you have to think about the different like training contract structures of the firm as well. So always have a look at the job that you're actually applying for, because I feel like sometimes you can just, you know, I've heard of people just kind of like applying everywhere and just hoping for the best because it just says it's a training contract, but like really think about what you want out of a training contract as well at the end of it.
Okay, great. All right. What made you apply to Pinsent Masons?
Pinsent Masons is a really great firm. Obviously, it's, you know, international, like it's offices all around the world. I think the work they do is fantastic. You know, they do such a varied amount of work, which is really exciting. But I think for me, it was the people. Like every single stage of the process, you know, everyone that I met, everyone that I spoke to was so lovely and so kind and so nice. And I just felt like, you know, it's just a really nice place to work. Everyone was super friendly, and I think the culture of the firm, you know, one of their core values is approachable, and I think, you know, everyone was really helpful and approachable all the way through. And I was really grateful for that, especially, because I was, coming in from a non-law background. It was my first kind of proper legal work experience, because I never had any actual legal work experience before this. So it was really interesting for me to kind of have this as my first kind of like taste of legal work experience, I guess. And it was just a real honor to get on the scheme.
Great. And how did you you did the vacation scheme during the pandemic, obviously, so it happened virtually. And do you have any tips on how can you make the most out of a virtual vacation scheme?
Goodness, I think the biggest thing would be to network. I think that's really like underrated. I think that's really important, especially now that it's virtual. It can be quite difficult because, if you were in the office, you'd build those relationships straight away because you'd be working with them. Whereas like you have to really like take the extra step and take initiative and just message, people that are on your scheme. So like, I would just message people on LinkedIn and be like, hi, like, I know you're on like the scheme, and I've made some incredible like lifelong friends from it. And I think it's really important to like build those relationships with people, because at the end of the day, that's what like made the VAT scheme amazing, is like the camaraderie between everybody was so kind to one another. And I think that's something that I'll really remember from that experience, that it was such a wonderful thing. So networking is really important. I think also just being really diligent with everything that you do, make sure that you proofread things and make sure that everything is like the perfect kind of standard that you want it to be. Don't just like send things in whatever, like you need to be like really diligent in what you do, and just make good impressions. I think just make sure that you're very polite, you look smart, you look well dressed for the camera, you're looking in the camera lens like I'm doing now. It can be very difficult to do that, if you've got back-to-back Zooms all day, you can get Zoom fatigue, like what am I looking at, like it can be quite intense, but that's also really important. And also I think just to enjoy it, I think that's really, really important. You just remember that you've earned your spot to be there. Like you should actually just really soak it up and enjoy it, even though it is virtual. Just take part in every event. I went to every single webinar, every single social that was virtual. Like we did like a little social thing for each office, where each one would make like a mocktail or a cocktail, and like we try based on the place that like Manchester or London or Leeds or whatever office it was at, and see who would win, and the grad recruitment team would choose. And it was just like a really nice bonding exercise, I think. And as well, what I loved about the scheme is that they kind of like interlinked all the offices. So like I was speaking to people in every office. Like I've got friends in like the Glasgow office or like the London office. Like I think that's really fantastic about the virtual scheme, and something that I would say maybe you wouldn't have even if it was in real life, because you would probably just speak to like the people that were in your your little like team in Manchester or in London or wherever it was. Whereas with this, I got the opportunity to speak to people like the entire just firm wide, which was really, really cool. And also like whenever there would be like webinars or anything like that, I would always note the name down of the speakers, and then I'd probably like send them a message afterwards if I had any more questions about what they were talking about. Just things like that, just going the extra mile. I think just always think about like what you can do to just like make yourself stand out that little bit more.
Okay, great. Which office did you do the vacation scheme at? Was it the London?
It was the virtual Manchester office.
Oh, virtual. Okay, great. What stood out to you about Pinsent Mason having the vacation scheme completed?
I think again, I think it was just it was the people, really. I think the people really made that. Everybody was so fantastic, and I also loved their focus on mental health. They started the Mindful Business Charter with like Adolf Goddard, and lots of other firms sent on to that now, really promoting mental health. And we did a webinar on that in the scheme, and I just thought it was really fantastic how such a like leading firm is talking about that kind of thing and breaking down the barriers. I thought it was really great. And obviously I think it was just really, really well organized. It was just really well done, and I had the best time. I just thought it was a really well structured, really well organized scheme, especially when it was virtual as well. I barely a lot of us say this that were on the scheme, we barely even noticed it was virtual sometimes, because it was just so like interactive and like engaging. Like you just didn't even realize that it's kind of weird to think that like I haven't met all the people on the scheme, even though we're all kind of like friends. It's crazy, but yeah.
Okay, great. What work did you do on the vacation scheme? Like which practice area did you sit in? Do you have any examples of a typical day on a virtual vac scheme?
I was sat in the corporate seat, but like we didn't really like it was kind of like loads of different things that we were doing. Like we were all doing like webinars and like workshops and group activities. There was loads of, it was a real like range of things. So I feel like the vacation scheme experience that I had would be very different to what someone else would have that was in real life, I guess, because it was all very it was just very well organized, and everybody kind of knew like what they were doing. So like we did various different tasks, like we did, you know, different like exercises where we'd have to write things, like analyzing contracts and like going through things like that, and you know, just getting feedback, which was really, really useful from supervisors. Like there was always, you know, there's a buddy system in place where, you know, you have like someone that's like a buddy, like a buddy, like that to kind of like, you know, guide you and whatnot. And that was really, really helpful to have that support system in place. But yeah, we did a range of different tasks. But you know, I loved all the workshops and all the interactive like panel events. That was really, really cool because you got to like ask people questions and really engage with what was going on and things like that.
I mean, you did say that you know you come from a non-law background, so how difficult was it for you when it came to illegal drafting and things like that on the VAT scheme?
Yeah, like it, you know, it was very interesting. You know, learning all this like new jargon and things like that. And I felt like, you know, you had loads of support on the scheme. So I you know, a lot of my friends, they do law. So I was like, you know, what does this word mean? Like, I don't really know what this is. So it was just really, really valuable for me because I'd never really had a flavor of that before because I've never done any legal work experience. All my work experience was all very like extensively like volunteering and things like that. So like I'd never actually had, you know, like a contract in front of me that I would like go through and whatnot. So it was really valuable to get to grips with that kind of jargon and just get like, it was just a really good introduction to the legal world, I think, for me.
All right, great. So that's the end from me, and now I think we're going to move on to the Q&A. So I think we had a couple of questions from the chat. I can hand it over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah, come in and we'd love to hear.
Yeah, so the first question is from Ubed. So hello everyone, I'm an international student hoping to do the GDL in January. My question is how hard it is for international students to secure a training contract with a UK law firm, and also does one need a special skill set?
I'm actually not sure about that question. I'm not sure, but I do know people that would have the answer to that. So I can, if you like, you know, send me a request on LinkedIn, then I can ask them after this if you want.
Yeah, and also that I spoke with the grad recruitment from Sherman and Sterling, and for example, they're very open to recruit international students as well. So my advice, if I can give you, is just get in touch with the recruitment of the firm you're interested in, because if they're a global firm, they should recruit international students as well. So the second question is from Taima. What were the hardest interview questions you were asked, and how did you answer them? So any tips for interviews?
I think the biggest tip that I could give anybody for interviews would be just to be yourself and relax. I think people often go into interviews being quite stiff and like, you know, being like, oh, like I need to act a certain way. But I think the interviewer really appreciates when you're just really relaxed in yourself and try and make it. What I always do is I always try and make it a bit of a conversation rather than an interview. So you're kind of, you know, talking to them just as if you were like, you know, a friend. I mean, obviously it depends on the place that you're interviewing, but for me, I found that, you know, that technique really worked, where I just tried to just be really natural about it. Like I just spoke to them like I was speaking like right now. Like I just wouldn't, you know, try and put on an act or anything like that. I'd try and just be very relaxed and just be calm about whatever I was talking about. And I think as well for interviews, for me, I felt like, I mean, this is obviously just my personal like preference, but like for me, I didn't like prepare too much. Like the questions that I thought, you know, maybe kind of ask, obviously you think about some questions that they might ask you know, obviously from a non-law perspective, like, you know, why are you doing law, things like that. Obviously you would like prepare for those kind of things in advance, but in terms of general preparation, what I would do is I would, you know, go over your application again and make sure that you kind of know what you've said, because sometimes, you know, it can be months since you've written your application and you can completely just forget what you've written. So then when you go back over it, you're like, right, yeah, I know what I said. Go over your CV, make sure that, you know, you just know all the stuff that you've done, and I honestly, you should be fine. Like as long as you've like, you know, you've gone through your application, you know it really well, and you're just yourself, like I think that's the winning kind of combination.
And Taima also asked about assessment centers. So what assessment centers did you do, and what is your advice for each of them?
Assessment centers. So we had one assessment center. So we do there was they had an interview as well, so that was part of the assessment centre with a partner, and we also had like an intro exercise to do. So I think again, the best thing to do is to just take your time with things, because, you know, I think you have a tendency, especially if there's a time limit or whatnot, like you have a tendency to kind of rush through it, and you can make mistakes. Then you think, oh goodness, I shouldn't have written that, or I could have added more to that. Like, you don't want to be in that position. I think just taking your time and making sure that everything that you do is of like real quality, I think that's like the best way to go about it, and just think about things logically. So go through things, you know, from start to finish. Don't like, you know, dart all over the place, have all these thoughts in your mind. Like, just think about it really logically from as soon as you go in there. Just be like, you know, I'm here to get a vacation scheme. Like, go in there with like a really positive mindset and attitude. Don't think, oh my goodness, this is really difficult, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, go in there being like, yeah, like I've got to this point, like, you know, they obviously see something within me to get this vacation scheme. So like, just go in there with a positive mind and positive attitude, and it should be fine.
So another question from Sarah. Did they take your A-levels into account on applying, or are they not too focused on them?
I think so. I think they have a minimum of ABB, I think, for A-level, but definitely check that. But I seem to, that seems to be the case for a few firms. But I think, again, you know, if it depends on the firm. Like, some firms want, you know, AAA, for example. Some firms want ABB. Some have no requirements. I think you just need to check on Chambers. I think they have like a really good guide where they have like an alphabetical system of all the firms, and whether they have like the grade requirements, and you can just see really easily which like firms require which grades.
So any tips for networking, and also how to look for and secure a vaccine? But of course, we are trying to cover everything. But about networking, if you get any tips about it.
So with networking, I think you just have to put yourself out there. Like, I remember when I first got LinkedIn, I was like, oh no, like, this is so scary, you know, it's really overwhelming, I think. And you see all these people and they all look so professional, like they know what they're doing, and you're like, oh no, like how am I gonna compete with this? How am I gonna do this? But I think the easiest thing is to just always send a personalized message. Like, I would never send a request to somebody without, you know, having sent like a little introductory message, because, you know, the thing is, like, you know, on LinkedIn you have connections, but if you don't actually have a connection with that person, then are they really a connection? Like, is it really that useful to have all these people just like sat on your phone that you don't really know, and they don't really know you? Like, really make a good first impression. Like, you're completely in control of it. Just be like, you know, hi, my name is like whatever, like this is, you know, what I'm planning on doing. Like, I would say, you know, hi, like I'm Lauren, I hope you're well. Like I'm just about to start the GDL, like I'm all that kind of stuff. Just a little bit of intro, just a tiny little intro, and just say, you know, I'd like, you know, could you like tell me more about your firm, or could you tell me more, like, why did you apply to the firm that you're at now? Or like, just be very specific and direct in kind of what you want, because obviously, like, you know, people get so many messages from like people, like hundreds of messages. It can be really overwhelming. So just make sure that yours like stands out and it's just really clear, really simple. Don't do anything too crazy, and yeah, just be really like clear with your intentions, I guess. And also attend loads of events too. That's always really important. You know, I went to like Bright Network events, Legal Cheek events. They're really good way of, you know, I've met some of my best friends from Bright Network events, which is so crazy. Like, it's you know, it's great to, you know, meet like-minded people. I think it's always good to talk to like-minded people, because I feel like it inspires you to do better as well. And that's something that I love about LinkedIn, is that, you know, you get to see other people's successes, and it really like motivates you. You're like, you know what, I want to be in that position, like, I want to do this. And I feel like instead of thinking of it like, oh, you know, they're, you know, everybody's doing so well, everybody's doing amazing, like, you know, why have I, you know, not getting a vac scheme or not getting a training contract? Think of it as like motivation. Like, this is where I want to be. Like, I want to get a training contract, I want to get a vac scheme, and think about like, how am I going to do that? So like, start by, you know, asking, you know, future trainees, associates, partners, whoever it may be that you want to talk to, just send them a message, because like, you know, the likelihood is they're going to respond. Like, everybody that I sent a message to responded and was really kind, no matter what like seniority they were, whether they were partners or like future trainees or whatever they were always really kind and really supportive. So I think it's just getting that like assurance from other people that you're like doing the right thing as well. So yeah, I definitely say do that.
And so we have another question about academic grades. If they play a very important part in your application. I think it depends on the firm, but and another question about how to develop your commercial awareness, and how important was in your application process, from written application to TC interviews.
I think commercial awareness it's such a like crazy like topic, isn't it? Like I feel like everyone has their own like commercial awareness, really. You know, when people say like this is exactly how you do it, this is exactly how you do it, I think you need to kind of like figure out what you're interested in commercially. So like, you know, for me, I'm really interested in technology and chemistry and like science and all that kind of thing. So I would go on like Financial Times and look at those particular news stories. So instead of trying to, you know, subscribe to a million different newsletters and having all these things in your inbox being like commercial awareness, like, you know, it could be, if you're struggling with it, it could be useful to just start off small and start off with an area that you're really interested in and to really develop your commercial awareness in one particular area that you know you're really interested in, rather than trying to like force yourself to look at all these different areas when maybe they might not be of interest yet. Like it's a good idea to start off with something that you're really interested in and build up like your like professional like expertise in one particular sector, and then you can move on to different ones, I guess. But I think it's good to have like one area that you're like really confident on, because then it'll come across really well in an interview, you know, especially if it's your like background. Like so like for me from chemistry, if I know a lot about what's going on in science and the deals that are going on there, like, you know, I can bring that out in an interview and talk about, you know, specific deals that I know the firm has done. That's also really important in your application. So I would go on the firm websites and go on, just type in like, you know, get Google alerts. I don't know whether any of you guys have done that. You know, I didn't even know that existed until recently, and someone was like, there's a thing called Google alerts, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. So like, you know, you can get these alerts every day about a specific firm, and that's always really good. So I would definitely do that.
So we have a question now we have another couple of questions if you have time, with Mahmoud. So I'm quite surprised that law firms accept candidates for VAC scheme before the GDL. I have an LLB, but not in English law. So will I still need to do the GDL? Should I apply for VAC scheme now or wait until I get the GDL?
I mean, I know over here for some firms, I think it's like your penultimate year if you're doing law that you can apply to VAC schemes, and then it's like third year if you're non-law, I believe. So I think it does depend on like where you're applying, but again, I definitely just check the website or even email grad recruitment. You know, that's, you know, what they're there for. Like they love to answer questions, so like, and they're really, really friendly, especially at Pinsent Masons. So, you know, definitely shoot them an email and see what they say.
So the last question from Sarah, when should a current second year student start applying for VAC schemes?
I mean, a lot of vacation schemes are like opening now, I guess. Some of them have opened already, some of them are opening in the next like month or so. It's kind of application season right now. So I think it depends what kind of like degree discipline you're doing. So if you're doing law, I would say like apply now if you're in your second year. But if you're non-law, then, you know, I don't know whether you actually can, if you're non-law, apply in your second year. I mean, I'm not sure, but I've heard
year.
Yeah, I think it's that, yeah. So yeah, I think it depends on what degree discipline you're doing, but yeah, just always know that it's this time of year when it's application season to apply. So whatever it is, it's going to be this time of year.
Okay, so thank you so much, Lauren. We are done with the questions.
Yeah, if anyone has any more, like just, you know, find me on LinkedIn and I'll be happy to answer any more questions anybody has.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I remember there was one question here that I think you said you knew somebody like hoping to do GDL, no, for the international law students. I think they may need to connect with you on LinkedIn for that.
Yeah,
so
that sounds good. I'll send over my like LinkedIn details and get that sorted.
Yes,
thank you.
Sounds good. Perfect.
Okay, great. Would you like to end by speaking a bit about GlobalTechLoop, perhaps?
Yeah, I could do. Yeah, like, you know, you guys can find me on GlobalTechLoop. You know, I founded it in like April, May kind of time with Matthew Berwick. I'm sure many of you guys know him. He's like the founder of Legal Lineup. We did GlobalTechLoop together, and yeah, it's grown and grown. It's really cool. We speak to people from all over the world, like top executives. You know, we've spoken to like the legal director of Google or like chief security of Microsoft, for example. And, you know, we produce magazines and do webinars as well with the people that we've interviewed, which is really, really cool. So yeah, give our page a follow. Bit of a shameless plug there. But if you like technology, you know, definitely keep up to date with that.
That's all right. You can pay me later. All right, great. Anything else, Shivani?
I think that's about it. And yeah, thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us. It was really insightful session. I really enjoyed listening about it. Since I'm not from the UK, I'm from India, and it's really insightful to know about different kind of structure that goes on over there. Really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
Thank you.
great. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you guys for turning up today.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
guys, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Let me just share Lauren's details. Lauren?
Oh yeah. I'll send you my details afterwards, and then yeah.
Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you.
cheers. Thank you, guys.